All right, let's jump right into the narrative trade. My second favorite setup where it pays to be early and we get to speculate a bit, have a bit of fun, try to connect some dots. So this isn't about indicators. This isn't even about charting. This is about attention, okay? When the market latches onto a story, the price follows. And it's your job to spot these themes or these narratives early and trade it within structure. Let's jump in. So what is the narrative trade? Narrative trades are fueled by belief. It's when a story or an idea captures the market's imagination and capital buys in. It could be a new technology, a political shift, legislation, a macro scare, whatever it is, it creates urgency and momentum and clean structure when it begins to move. So think back, an example we all know is the California gold rush, where everyone ran out there to pan for gold and mine and get rich quick, right? Who actually made the most money in the gold rush? It's two people, the man who sold shovels and the man who sold jeans. They spotted the trend early and positioned around it. Okay, that is your mindset. How can you connect the dots? You don't just follow the story, you ask who benefits the most if this story plays out. That's where the best trades live, is under the hood. And another example of this would be the railroad boom, where most people were buying railroad stocks, but under the hood was all the steel companies and the mining companies that really compounded for years and years and years as the railways expanded. So looking under the hood, connecting the dots. And we'll go into a few more examples, some that I've traded and one that I'm positioning in now. But real quick before we move on, why I like the narrative play so well is your ability to stack such a good R multiple. So your risk reward on a trade like this. My triple R, my bread and butter setup, that's a 2-to-1 minimum. Sometimes I get more, but these are typically 4 to sometimes even like 10 plus XR, right? If you can get in early and you can follow structure, or you can be protected by structure, then you can get some very attractive risk scenarios out of the narrative play. So let's continue here. So how to spot a narrative trade? You're looking for early signs of attention shifting. Is there a theme showing up in headlines? Is volume starting to spike in related names? Are certain tickers breaking out in a sector before others? Narrative trades reward forward thinkers. You don't wait for confirmation from the news. You catch the rotation before it's obvious. And we do this by identifying a few things. For example, an emerging theme. Currently right now, there's a lot of talk around rare earths, right? The United States does not want to be so reliant on China for rare earths. And they've been saying this a lot. The current administration is beginning to build legislation around the fact that the US needs to be less reliant on China for its rare earths. Okay, so that is a narrative, and there are movements that are happening within the market under the hood that is reflecting the positioning of Wall Street or just of capital behind this move. So that is looking under the hood. We know America wants to be self-reliant on its ability to extract and provide rare earths. Well, who's going to benefit from that happening? That is the narrative trade. Then you've got volume and structure. A lot of times a narrative trade comes out of some sort of rounding bottom. You see a change in character, you see growing volume, and you just see a shift in structure. So maybe you go from lower highs to lower lows and you shift a change in character to higher highs, higher lows with volume coming in. When I can align an idea with structural change that I can visualize and I see, that is the narrative trade. I'm very interested. So how do you trade it? I treat it like any other setup with structure. I just touched on this just a bit. The story is building, the stock is in a clean trend or reclaiming levels, volume is picking up, and there's a clear spot to define risk. Guys, we're still not guessing, all right? We are speculating, but we're not just throwing money out there and seeing what happens, okay? We are defining and respecting our risk profile. I use the same criteria as I always do: clean levels and proper risk. Narrative is the catalyst, structure is the filter. So how do we trade it? We've got story building. This ensures the narrative is clearly forming and gaining traction. All right, we don't want to guess. So for example, we don't want to say, hey, Trump is going to make the Fed lower rates. Sure, that may happen, but we want to make sure that we're not fully exposed until we know it happens, right? So it's okay to scale in as the story builds, but make sure you have full confirmation before you go all in. And then we want a clean trend and levels so that we can set our risk, right? If this thing's hopping all around, or maybe it's in a downtrend, right? It's not even shown a break in structure, a change in structure. All right, the stock must be in a discernible trend or reclaiming significant support and resistance level, a change of character. We want volume confirmation. I'll show you what all of this looks like in just a second on a chart in a trade that I've just entered, but we want volume confirmation. Volume should be increasing, validating the price action. You know that saying, volume precedes price action. So what to avoid would be chasing late hype. Avoid entering this trade when the narrative is already widely known. Look, if they're talking about it on CNBC, you're late. This thing is probably already in an uptrend. Just do the triple R on it, right? We're talking about getting into things a bit earlier than that. Don't force it just because some theme is popular. Price action and technical structure do matter. And make sure you don't marry the story, all right? I am actually in one that I will show you here that I'm nearing closing my position on. I'd really like it to work out, and I was just up a few 100% a couple weeks ago on my options, and I am still up. But look, if this thing turns on me, I won't let a winner turn into a loser. I'll move on, it's fine, or I'll look for a better entry. It's okay, but don't marry the story, all right? We don't have crystal balls. We're looking for an idea. We may believe in this. We may think, man, this is awesome. We found it. This is the fun part of trading. This is being a detective. This is fun to speculate, right? And it's why you get such great risk reward. But if you're wrong, cut your loss and move on and enter at a longer time. Maybe you're not wrong, you're early, okay? And you can get a better entry down the road when you get confirmation. So building narrative awareness. So we're looking at headlines, news feeds, and we're paying attention to legislation as a big one. You know, especially in America, money is behind legislation, right? If they pass a law, or if they say that they're going to, I don't know, improve America's independence and rare earths, well, they find American companies and give them giant checks to do so, right? It is what it is. That's how legislation works in America. And another example would be the space race that is currently happening. And Elon has a hold on this for the most part right now, but we are starting to see money being distributed a little more broadly into some other names like Rocket Lab and LUNR and things like this. LUNR is the ticker. That's not actually the name of the stock, but regardless, the point is that sometimes you'll see the money get spread out, and behind legislation is money, all right? And you can see a lot of opportunities for narrative plays behind legislation. Social and forums, you know, you can find stuff in there. It's not what I love to do. I personally don't want to do meme stocks, right? It doesn't work for me. Some people do well, doesn't work for me. That's not what I'm looking for out of a narrative trade. Sector and ETF flow is a big identifier. This is how I get into quite a few of my narrative trades. Currently, I am in a real estate narrative trade where I've identified some strength in the real estate and the REIT ETFs, and I just see some money flowing into there, so I started connecting dots. Hey, maybe we're entering a rate cutting cycle. XYZ, we're in a real estate trade, a narrative trade. And I won't go into it too deep, but I'll show you some of the charts and why I entered them and help explain this trade a bit more. But the other would be global and macro themes. And you need to be careful with these, but they do present opportunity. This would be, unfortunately, wars or trade deals would be another one. But you should understand the larger economic and geopolitical trends that could fuel a narrative play. Again, what you're asking here is what are people talking about? And it doesn't have to be everyone yet, but you know, what's beginning to get some traction and who gains the most if this plays out, and is price reflecting it yet? So a couple key takeaways. Narrative trades are about identifying early market attention and riding the momentum. Narrative trades don't happen every week, but when they do, they move the needle. Be early, stay objective, and find the shovel sellers. We'll go ahead and jump in, and I will show you some examples of what I'm currently in and what I would like to continue building a position in as well. And I'll sort of talk through how I spotted these ideas and why I'm in them, right? And exactly what a narrative trade means to me. So I am currently in comp with 2-year leaps. And what I saw here is, again, a couple things. First, we saw the real estate ETF caught my attention a couple months ago, right? And I've got lines all in here because I just did a breadth video for my trading group. But what we saw here a couple weeks ago was the possibility of real estate breaking out or reclaiming the 200, which is very bullish structure, right? It did so, and we kind of expected a bit of a pullback. I was hoping that it pulled back, and let me get this out of here too, I just made that today, but I was hoping it pulled back and went, but we had a little bit of a macro situation, and it did break the 200. I'd love to see it back over, but anyways, the point and why I got into this was we were breaking out over the 200. That's one thing. This caught my attention. It made me start thinking and wondering, why is real estate moving when it's been, really lagging for years now? What's going on here? All right, well, there's a lot of talk of a rate cut cycle. Well, does real estate do well in rate cut cycles? Yeah, typically it does. Typically it outperforms the SPY by over 30% over the 18 months following that rate cut cycle. Is anyone positioning? Well, yeah, clearly there's some buying coming in. Connecting dots, beginning to build a thesis, build a narrative, okay? So I'm looking around and, I like some REITs. We'll jump in right here. Here's some of the ones that I'm watching, the REITs up top. And yeah, of course, I'll get that, but I wanted something a little more juicy as my first position into the trade. So I jumped into comp, and I took it right through the 200, but I only got a quarter size because, as you can see, earnings was coming up a week later, and we got a good reaction to earnings, and I went up to full size on this. So that was the idea. There's a couple of the indicators that I saw. Another here for me was the growing volume, right? So volume precedes price action. I also really like these rounding bottoms off of recent IPOs. So just stacking the confidence is what I was doing there. So, I mean, this is, bread and butter narrative trade. I do stuff like this all the time, and you can find these things and you can speculate and get into moves early and get really attractive risk reward. I mean, you can see I'm going for 15-ish to 1 on this trade, and I expect to get it within the next 2 years. And I mean, it's a couple of these can, but make your nut for the year. So another one would be, well, before I get into the other one that I'm building a position in right now, let's talk about AI, right? So AI would be an easy trade, right? Yeah, you could have bought NVIDIA and made millions. Okay, well, most didn't, right? What else is going on there, right? There's still so much infrastructure inside of the AI ecosystem as all of this comes to market, right? We need the servers, we need the powering. So nuclear, if you look at the NNE is one of them. We've got CEG, but all of these power companies, nuclear specifically, power companies that are going to power these giant server rooms, they're crushing, man. So I mean, that's looking under the hood. What is going to facilitate the onset of AI, the growth of AI, which I think at this point everyone agrees is coming? Power. Okay, so that was looking under the hood, connecting dots, and power trades have done very, very well. And Oklo, I'll just do a few here, but Oklo, I mean, this is all moving because of AI. This is going to be what powers it. Oklo, CEG, right? So that's looking under the hood. Of course, you can buy semiconductors, but who's selling the jeans? Another one that I'm getting into is RKT. This is another, this is also related to the rate cut cycle. If that happens, who is to benefit? Well, people will definitely want to be refinancing. They've got a stranglehold on I don't want to get into specifically the ticker. It's more the narrative I want to discuss here and how we speculate and build a trade idea, a thesis. And that's the idea into this one. That is why I'm in RKT and Rocket Mortgage. They're going to be doing 80% plus, arguably, of the mortgages that are very likely to see a large spike if we go into a rate cut cycle. And then I want to touch real quick on the rare earths. That was another one. So it's like the US wants to be more independent in their ability to extract rare earths. So there's legislation coming out, there's executive orders coming out that is going to make this happen. So sure, you could buy the rare earths. I mean, shoot, gold's done well recently. I think even platinum. I think even platinum ran. Copper I know had a pop recently. Wow, that's a nasty little sell-off. But I mean, sure, you can go into the commodity market and buy the rare earths, but there's other things. So like, what is a U.S. mining company? You know, a U.S. extractor, right here, MP. They just got a huge contract that is directly related to the executive orders of the United States becoming more self-reliant on extracting rare earths. There it is. That is your narrative trade. Okay, I am in one, and this is TMC, and we're getting a bit more of a pullback than I would like to see, right? I won't let this go green to red. You know, I would close it out if we hit this level and see if we get a deeper retracement, and I'll just layer back in at that point should we do that. I don't want to get into the ticker that deeply, but the idea is, again, the United States has announced they have made executive orders. They've created legislation around the idea of becoming more self-reliant on obtaining rare earths. And this company has mining rights to a field of them in the deep sea. And arguably, it's a much cleaner version of getting the most important four metals or minerals, blah, 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 blah. You know, I'm not trying to sell you on this stock, but that is the point. You know, we got into it because we see a shift in character, okay? Obvious shift in character, obvious volume coming in. We've got the narrative, we've got the story behind it, we've got a timeline, things like this. So that is another example of a narrative play. All right, and we'll do one more, would be, let's say Rocket Lab, RKLB, there it is, Rocket Lab. So SpaceX has always gotten most of the money for our space exploration program. But, you know, like I said earlier in this video, it looks like they're beginning to want to spread that out a bit more, and you can just see how that has affected the space. You've also got LUNR, which I am in. This is another narrative trade for me. Same deal. You've got, you know, increasing volume, you've got structure, higher lows. So, you know, higher highs, higher lows, things that you want to see, and you've got reaction. It's just, it's all there, right? You've got a story, you've got structure, and you've got your risk managed. And that's what we're doing. So this is a really, really interesting and fun way to trade the market. You can get, again, very attractive risk reward with these setups, and I encourage you to look for them and let me know what you find.